Welcome
to Purana Talk. We're reading the Garuda Purana, and we're in the second kanda, or section. There seem to be
or
two.
version, maybe even. We're not quite sure yet.
Yeah, it's the second in this publication, and sometimes called the Dharma Kanda or the Preta Kanda. And we're at chapter 2. Results of actions. See, all right. To digress already, the setup seems to be in this Garuda Purana that the last chapter, which was the first chapter, was Garuda's first meeting with Vishnu. And having met Vishnu, he had a lot of questions. Mostly having to do with death and the rituals surrounding death and how the dead and the living interact in a way. And so chapter 2.
Why does all that I love die? That's kind of what it comes down to. And he goes on and on about it.
Well, it's more like, the details of the Pinda ritual that's supposed to happen.
Why do we do this? Why do we do these rituals? Yeah. He's going through a really good list.
He's basically
doubts.
2 years old with God. He's nothing but questions. Mm-hmm. And so in chapter 2, Krishna is attempting to answer him. And
Krishna being one of the avatars of
Vishnu. Vishnu, Krishna. They keep changing the names, so you have to pay attention. Because now Garuda, they continue to call him Garuda, but at some point they'll call him something else, I'm sure. But the big gods, Vishnu, Shiva, get called something different every stanza when they're talking about him. All right, let us read. Lord Krishna said, "O gentle one, you have put up the right question. That too for the general good of the people. Now hear attentively. I shall tell you about the rite to be performed after death. It is without any controversy quoted by Shrutis and Smritis. It has been heard by the gods, including Indra, nor by yogins absorbed in yoga. It has not been heard. It has not been heard by the gods, including Indra, nor by yogins absorbed in yoga." How does that work? "Being the secret of secrets, it has not been conveyed to anyone, anywhere."
Nobody knows this.
It's your lucky day. We're going to let you in on a big secret. "O Garuda of great accomplishment, I shall tell you about this, since you are my devotee. There is no place for a sunless person. The heaven is not for him. One must have a son by any means whatsoever. The son can take his father out of hell if he cannot get him salvation. The son puts his shoulder to coffin, and the grandson lights the fire. A woman in her menses shall stay in the hut, and lie on the bed bestrewed with sesame and darba grass on the ground. She shall put 5 gems in the mouth, thus her fetus attains growth. If the seed is destroyed, then whereat the conception? Hence, for the protection of the fetus, she shall lie on the ground, as enjoined in the Shastras. Similarly, in regard to the dying person, he is laid on the ground, besmeared with cow dung and bestrewed with darba grass. Thus the ailing person is released of sins which do not cling to him any more. A bunch of darba for his bed takes him to heaven, no doubt. Darba should be thrown off after the corpse is removed from the place. Where there is no besmearing, the ground remains impure. Where the earth is already besmeared, it should be smeared again, for the sake of purification."
They may be talking about resurfacing the floor, something like that, because they use cow dung to make these surfaces in living areas and things like that. So,
and they shine, huts, and
they're very clean. I mean, you mustn't get the wrong idea, but it's very polished looking. hard surface.
Yes. Okay, if the corpse is kept on the unsmeared ground, the foul spirits enter the corpse.
Okay, they started talking about that. Go back. I want to know what number that begins, where they start talking about if a person dies.
Well,
Or
I don't know what you mean. I mean, this is this death thing is being talked about from the whole thing.
No, but they start talking about specifics about the body and how to deal with bodies.
Yeah, okay. Let's start with 9 and see if that's where we want to be. A bunch of darba grass for his bed takes him to heaven, no doubt. Darba should be thrown off after the corpse is removed from the place.
Before that.
Similarly, in regard to the dying person, he is laid on the ground. See, 7-8 was interesting. It says, if the seed is destroyed, then whereat the conception, hence for the protection of the fetus, she shall lie on the ground, as enjoined in the Shastras. Similarly, in regard to the dying person, he is laid on the ground.
That's
smeared.
the part.
Yeah, this is in 7-8.
Right.
Similarly,
the dying person should be laid
in
on
regard
the
to the dying person, he is laid on the ground, be smeared with cow dung. And it's not the ailing, dying person that's smeared with cow dung, it's the ground. This is not clear in the translation necessarily. In regard to the dying person, he is laid on the ground to be smeared with cow dung and be strewed with darba grass. The ground, not the dying person. Otherwise, he's just going to check out. It's like, I'm not putting up with this. They're smearing me with cow dung and sprinkling me with grass. They misread the instructions.
Tie the cat to the post. Yeah.
We'll tell you about that one. All right. Thus, the ailing person is released of sins which do not cling to him anymore. A bunch of darba for his bed takes him to heaven, no doubt. Darba should be thrown off after the corpse is removed from the place. Just, sweep it up.
Clean up after yourself.
Sweep it up, burn the darba. Where there is no besmearing, the ground remains impure.
So what verse is that?
10. Where the earth is already besmeared, it should be smeared again for the sake of purification. Once the body is removed.
Oh, probably after. They're talking about how to purify it afterwards.
If the corpse is kept on the unsmeared ground, this is 11, we're finally getting back to where we decided we needed to reread it.
Thank you.
If the corpse is kept on the unsmeared ground, the foul spirits enter the corpse.
Yeah, that was what got my attention, because they're saying that the corruption of the corpse through deterioration is caused by this, and that's just an interesting idea.
So the ground should be smeared before the corpse is laid on it.
Right.
If the ground is not smeared, then, the
bad
corpse
things will happen to the corpse.
Yeah, well, he might become contaminated by something that will
putrefy.
Yeah, go bad faster.
Yeah.
12. A circle should be drawn round the corpse to fix up the circumference. And it says a kind of mystical diagram in a footnote to this. Perhaps chakra is the word in the original. Shraddha shall be performed where the feet of the Brahmins should be washed. All these would not serve the corpse if the same is not placed on the ground. The circle should be drawn on the ground around the corpse. Then Shraddha performed where the feet of Brahmins should be washed. All these would not serve the corpse if the same is not placed on the ground. The feet of the Brahmin, what? The water?
I'm not sure about that.
Then 13. We haven't read that yet.
No, I know. I'm just noticing how it's going.
He's reading ahead. 13. Brahma, Vishnu, Rudra, Lakshmi, and fire stay within the circle. Hence, a circle is drawn round the corpse.
Okay, that's important. So, verse 13 is...
Brahma, Vishnu, Rudra, Lakshmi, and fire stay within the circle.
Brahma,
Vishnu, Rudra, Lakshmi, and fire. We'll have to wait. Hence the circle
they're
is drawn around the
within the
corpse.
circle.
They stay within the circle. If a circle is not drawn, the deceased person, whether a child, youth, or old, does not get a womb, but remains in the air, O Garuda.
So
They don't get reborn.
they don't get reborn. Yeah. So that's 14.
Yes. 15. He may not be born soon, but live in the air for some time. He receives no shraddha, no libation of water from his relatives. O Garuda, sesame is held sacred, for it is produced from my perspiration. The sesame can destroy the evil spirits. So sesame is Vishnu or Krishna sweat, depending on how you're reading it. It's Krishna allegedly speaking here, but Krishna is Vishnu. But
that's very useful information. Sesame seeds to banish with. Great. Good to know.
Yeah. The sesame is white, black, or of the color of the cow's urine. They can burn all sins committed by the deceased. A single grain of sesame offered with the libation of water to the deceased, or an article given in charity, or a sacrifice held for his welfare becomes fruitful as Drona Kalasha does in rewards. Darbas are born from my hair, and sesame from my perspiration. Darba grass is his hair.
I'd like to know more about what that is. I should look it up.
What Darba grass is?
It's referred to all the time in these rituals.
Okay. By performing shraddha, one can please deities, asuras, and the manes, who are ancestral spirits. 20. The universe and the creator of the universe live by the ceremonial form. By wearing the sacred thread over the right shoulder, one can please the creator, the manes, and the deities. So he removed the asuras, put in creators, otherwise kept the manes and the deities in there as who you're pleasing. 21 to 23. When the sacred thread is worn over the right shoulder, the manes are pleased. Brahma stays at the root of Darba, Janardana in the middle, and Shankara at the point of Darba. Thus the three deities are said to be stationed in Darba. The Brahmanas, mantras, sacred grass, fire, and tulasi are never spoilt, though used again and again. Tulasi, Brahmani, cows, Vishnu, and Ekadashi. These five are the protection boats for the people drowning in the ocean of worldly existence. Interesting. So Tulasi, Brahmins, cows, Vishnu, and the Ekadashi day, the 11th day of the lunar fortnight, are the five boats that keep you from drowning in the worldly existence. So these should be important to you. Tulasi, Brahman, cow, Vishnu, and Ekadashi. Very much Vaishnava.
So this is verse
23.
23.
These five are the 24 says these five are the protection boats for the people drowning in the ocean of worldly existence. Vishnu, Ekadashi, Gita. Oh, well, it gives you another. Wait a second. It gives you another list here, but it's similar. Vishnu, Ekadashi, Gita, Tulasi, Brahmana, and cow. Well, it's the same. It's the same, but they added Gita. Everything else is there. Oh, and then it says afterwards, these are the 6 steps to salvation in this universal fortress of little use.
So that's why
they're
added one.
It's just oddly broken up here.
6.
Yeah. It says these 5 and then lists 6 in 24, but these 5 is referring to the 23 list.
Right.
All right. These are the 6 steps to salvation in this universal fortress of little use. Sesame and darbas are sacred, and so is tulsi. So these are the 3 plants that they think are especially important: sesame, darba grass, and tulsi. And tulsi is a kind of basil, a sacred basil, holy basil. And it kind of grows like a little twiggy tree. These guard the deceased. It's a shrubbery. These guard the deceased against misfortune. These 3 plants. Darbas should be taken out with hands. The earth should be sprinkled over with water. As the hour of death approaches, darbas should be placed in the hands of the deceased. He whose body is spread over by darbas goes to Vishnu Loka, no matter if he is not initiated in the Vedic lore. So you are supposed to sprinkle grass clippings on the dying.
Well, put it in his hand. It says.
Well, and his body spread over by darbas
Right.
goes to Vishnu Loka. Even if he's not initiated in Vedic lore.
That'll surprise him.
Feet of the deceased person are kept on the ground and the toe raised upward. In this ocean of universal existence, which is practically of little use, the atonement of the sin is made by sacrificing the body in the holy fire. Having smeared the ground with the cow dung, they should spread the mattress of darba for the dying person. So again, we're going back to how this is done, a little more detail on it. So after smearing the ground with the cow dung, then you spread a mattress of darba for the dying person on the cow dung and lay the person on the darba. Salt is very much effective for the destruction of sins. In 30, let them donate salt for the mains, for it suits their taste and takes them to heaven. So it helps your ancestral spirits. They like salty taste, and it takes them to heaven. As for the men, in general, it fulfills their desires. Salt. Salt. This is interesting. I mean, salt
It's
is
very interesting because salt's one of the oldest items of trade in the world that we know of. This is one of the first things people start trading.
The only mineral that one uses to flavor one's food, as a rule. I guess there could be arguments made for possible aluminum or alum. Salt has come out from the body of Vishnu. Hence, yogins recommend a gift of salt, placing the same over other gifts.
So salt comes in at 30, right?
Salt, they start talking about salt in 30. For the destruction of sins. You give it to the mains. They like it. And it's one of the 6 tastes, too. And so it kind of hooks into Ayurveda here, and you wonder why the mains desire it. They must have some doshic imbalance, that requires them to regulate.
Well, they certainly need grounding.
They
right?
need.
That's
They need
what they don't have is the vehicle.
There you go. 33, 34. When at the time of death the soul does not depart but lingers onto the body, no matter whether the dying person is a Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Shudra of either sex, they should donate salt for him, whereby the soul leaves the mortal body and enters the doors of heaven, which open immediately for him.
And of course, when we do Hekate ritual or exorcism, we always use salt.
O King of Birds, now hear from me in detail the various forms of death. So they've used another name for Garuda here. They've referred to him as O King of Birds.
In 34?
In 34, probably. Yeah, 33, 34. But towards the end, so I would guess 34. Now hear from me in detail the various forms of death. 35. It is Kala, which detaches soul from body. It causes death of the person at the appointed hour without a single exception.
Kala is time or darkness or something, right?
Kala is time, yeah. Mm-hmm. Mahakala is big time.
So eventually,
great time,
you will die of something.
Yeah. Time is, black. Too, yeah. Just as the wind scatters clouds here and there, just like that Kala, the destroyer floats people from one end of the shore to another. Whether they be sattvic or rajasa or tamasa, all these bhavas operate in man due to the influence of Kala. Sun, moon, Shiva, water, air, Indra, fire, sky, earth, herbs, Vasus, rivers, seas, existent or non-existent, O Garuda, all these are created and destroyed by Kala in due course of time. Indeed, O Garuda, when the hour of death approaches, then by chance a certain disease raises up its head. The organs grow weak, troubles start showing their powers, as if all of a sudden millions of scorpions have stung the person. O bird, then the person begins to feel the pang of death. At the very hour his consciousness is replaced by unconsciousness. The breath is pushed by Yama's messengers standing nearby. The person assumes a terrible form, and the breath lingers to stay in the throat. Froth comes out from the mouth full of saliva. Just at the moment when everybody is lamenting, the soul, as big as a thumb, is carried away by Yama's messengers, even as it looks towards its home. Now hear about the state of death. 46. The heat in the body is disturbed due to sudden commotion of winds, though without fuel it breaks up the vital points. The Udana wind moves upward, it stops the downward movement of the deceased who in his lifetime had full devotion for the Lord but no desire in return. He who has never spoken falsehood, nor has any partiality in devotion, but believes in God, obtains death peacefully. He who does not stray from Dharma due to pleasure, wrath, or envy, but does what he says and is gentle, obtains death peacefully. Those who preach ignorance pass through darkness. Those who are false winners, liars, false witnesses, liars, and deceitful obtain death unconsciously, just as those who abuse the Vedas. The ferocious, foul-smelling messengers of Yama with clubs and sticks in their hands come and seize this wicked person. Having reached a ferocious path, he begins to shiver. He cries for his father, mother, and sons. His indistinct voice, spoken with effort, appears to be single-lettered. Due to terrible suffering, his looks waver and his mouth gets dry due to hard breath. Then, wrapped up in suffering, the jiva departs from the body. Since that very moment, the body becomes untouchable and despicable. Thus I have spoken to you about the form of death of the mortal man. Now I shall answer your query about the peculiarities of form the body takes in different births. Due to different actions performed in the previous births, the wandering jivas attain different forms, as of a deity, a demon, a yaksha, man, beast, bird, etc. O Lord of birds, these are due to the chain of actions performed in different ages. Now I shall tell you about the results of actions which a person obtains, so that the strangeness involved is clearly explained. When the sinners have exhausted the fruits of their actions in dreadful hells, they are born on the earth. Now hear about their characteristics. The killer of a Brahmin attains the form of a deer, horse, pig, or camel. The stealer of gold becomes a worm, or a germ, or a fly. He who lies on the bed of a teacher becomes grass, plant, or vine. The slayer of a Brahmin suffers from consumption. A drunkard possesses brown teeth. A gold stealer has bad nails. The defiler of the teacher's bed possesses bad skin. That very thing becomes his mark, with which he was associated in the previous birth. If he moves with the wretched people, he himself becomes wretched within a year. The sins of the people spread by talk, touch, breathing, going together, eating together, sitting together, worshiping together, by teaching and sexual union. The sins of the people spread by. After having sexual intercourse with the wives of other men, or after killing a Brahmin, one becomes a Brahmana Rakshasa in a lonely place. A Brahma Rakshasa. And that's a Rakshasa, excuse me. One becomes a Brahma Rakshasa. It's a Brahma demon. The stealer of a jewel is born in a low caste. A man who steals plants becomes a shrew. A thief of corn becomes a rat. That of vehicle, a camel, and that of fruit, a monkey.
How far back did this reincarnational, if you do this, this happens to you stuff happen? Where did that start? That's fairly
He
recent.
announces it in 56, and he starts it in 57.
All right.
56. Now I shall answer your query about the peculiarities of form the body takes in different births. And then 57, 58, due to different actions. In the previous births, the wandering jivas attain different forms as a deity, a demon, a yaksha, etc.
All right. And then,
It goes on.
The following verses are actually what causes what.
Yeah, well, it's, I guess maybe you could argue 59 is the beginning. Now I shall tell you about the results of actions which a person obtains so that the strangeness involved is explained clearly. And then 60, when the sinners have exhausted the fruits of their actions in dreadful hells, they are born on the earth. 61, now here, I keep moving it. Maybe it starts in 61. Now hear about the characteristics, their characteristics. The killer of a Brahmana, 61 is now hear about their characteristics. Killer of a Brahmana attains the form of a deer, horse, pig, or camel. Stealer of gold becomes a ruler. So that's really 61 on.
Right.
There you go.
And it's still going on. So
that's
why I was wondering, because it didn't stop like a lot of them do.
So 68. The thief of corn becomes a rat. That of a vehicle, a camel. That of fruit, a monkey. He who takes meals uninvited becomes a crow. He who steals utensils becomes a vulture. The stealer of fruit becomes a honeybee. Well, I thought he was going to be a monkey. That of a cow, a vulture. That of a woman's clothes, a white leper. Leper?
Maybe lemur. I don't know.
And that of juice possesses no taste at all. The stealer of bronze becomes a swan, so also the stealer of others' possessions. The slayer of his teacher becomes epileptic, and the performer of cruel deeds becomes a dwarf. He who discards his wife becomes an animal to be killed by a hunter. He who snatches the possessions of a deity or a brahmana suffers from jaundice. He who eats meat becomes a leper. He who does not return the deposit becomes one-eyed. He who lives on the earth of his wife becomes lame. No, he who lives on the earning of his wife becomes lame. He who discards progeny and wife encounters ill luck. He who eats sweets only becomes rheumatic. He who has sexual union with a Brahmin's wife becomes a jackal. A stealer of bed becomes kshapanaka, and that's a Buddhist or Jain mendicant. That'll teach you. And that of clothes becomes a moth. He who envies is born blind. He who steals a lamp becomes a beggar. He who kills a friend becomes an owl. He who abuses the ancestors suffers from consumption. He who speaks lies cannot speak properly. He who gives false witness suffers from dropsy. He who disturbs a marriage is born as a mosquito. He who eases himself on crossroads is born as a bull. Poops in the crossroads, he thinks. He who spoils a young girl becomes a eunuch. He who sells the Vedas becomes a leopard. He who performs a sacrifice, but not in the prescribed manner, becomes a pig. He who eats here and there becomes a cat. He who sets fire to a forest becomes a glowworm. He who eats the stale food becomes a worm. He who envies others becomes a bee. He who sets fire becomes a leper. He who does not give gifts becomes a bull. A stealer of cows becomes a serpent. That of food suffers from dyspepsia. A stealer of water becomes a fish. That of milk a crane. He who gives stale food to a Brahmin becomes hunchbacked. If he steals fruits, his progeny dies, O bird. If he eats alone without giving a morsel of it to anyone else, he becomes issueless. If he does not opt for sannyasa, he becomes an evil spirit in the desert. A stealer of water becomes a chataka. That of book is born blind. Book stealer is born blind. 83. He who promises but does not give it to the brahmanas becomes a jackal. He who earns the blame of the people becomes a tortoise. A seller of fruits meets with bad luck. He who marries a Shudra woman becomes a wolf. What if he's already a Shudra? He who touches fire with foot becomes a cat. He who eats another's meal suffers from diseases. He who breaks a water reservoir becomes a fish. He who hears neither Hari's tale nor the praise of the good suffers from ear disease. He who takes out a morsel from another's mouth becomes a blockhead. He who steals the deity's utensils suffers from gundamala. This is inflammation of the glands of the neck. He who observes religion without sincerity suffers from a skin disease. A treacherous fellow suffers from headache. He who is against Shiva suffers from the disease of genital organ. And the women, too, who commit these sins suffer in a similar way, or they become wives of persons suffering in the aforesaid manner. After their present life they reach hell. Know that I have told you all this in short, O bird. Just as there are many kinds of disease, so also there are many kinds of man. In this way, due to the variety of their actions, men attain happiness or grief. Thus I have told you about the strangeness of human nature. Good actions give good results, and bad actions give bad results. In this way, your queries are answered completely.
So, just some observations. To a great extent, the whole thing is skewed to make it seem like the victim is to be blamed. And so this is the thing that I don't like about this. But this idea that your actions in this life can cause either illness in this life or in the next one is something that's new. I don't remember running into that before. Like, certainly we've run into these reincarnational lists before,
I think,
but we haven't run into this thing that you might have an illness because you behaved in a certain way.
Yeah, that might be new.
That's new.
Mm-hmm. You were a liar, so now you have a speech impediment.
Yeah. Maybe immediately. Like, it didn't make it clear that it would be the next life necessarily. It might happen right away.
No, I think it made it clear that this is, you explained this in the present from this behavior in the past life.
See.
So if you have a speech impediment now, it's
because you were bad then.
You were a liar.
But what you do about that, like, how do you remedy any of that?
You do good works so that your next rebirth is
better.
Yeah. And you can do expiatory practices. There are rituals and things like that. They're supposed to be, they will
helpful.
Erase the bad karma collected. Karmic dirt. Anywho.
Go to Kumbh Mela or whatever.
Yeah, something like that. I go to pilgrimage. I've done enough pilgrimages over there. I should be okay. I don't know. I think they all expunge past sins. Some of them say they'll expunge future sins too, but I kind of think that might be an overstatement.
Blank check, maybe.
Yeah.
I wouldn't.
I wouldn't give it
checks.
Yeah. Okay. See ya.
Bye.